Welcome. My name is Susan Oxtoby. I'm the Director of Film and Senior Film Curator at the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. Welcome to our live stream conversation related to the new film Yiddish, which was released in 2020. It's a French-Israeli co-production that runs 61 minutes in length. It's directed by Nurith, Aviv. This is a beautiful, thoughtful film about 7 young scholars who share their love of Yiddish and for their love of Yiddish avant-garde poetry written between the wars. The film has received a lot of critical praise. In France, critic Jacques Mendelbaum of Le Monde wrote, "It's a must-see, makes ancient worlds resonate today." Here in the Bay Area, film journalist Michael Fox has recently written in J Weekly that this is a film about vitality and the relevance of Yiddish in the present moment. If you're a fan of Yiddish poetry, Jewish culture, linguistics, or related intellectual pursuits, Yiddish will warm your heart and quite possibly send you searching for collected works of your new favorite poet. Just before beginning with our guests, I want to thank the Center for Jewish Studies, the Center for Middle Eastern Studies, and the Department of Comparative Literature here at UC Berkeley for their help with this event. And to also mention the backstory, I previewed Yiddish in January. The film is distributed here in the States by Icarus Films. And then I was immediately struck by this work, and I thought this is a perfect film for the BAMPFA Watch from Home platform, where we stream a lot of contemporary documentaries. And so as we often do, I thought, well, I should see who on campus here at Berkeley might be a good conversant for a live stream conversation with the director. And to my great surprise, I learned that Chana Kronfeld in the Comparative Literature department actually had based a course last fall at Berkeley on Yiddish. So I thought this was just too wonderful. Nurit Aviv is a filmmaker. This is the first film I've seen of hers, but I actually was familiar with her work as a talented cinematographer, working with filmmakers like Agnes Varda, Amos Gataï, and Jean-Marie Teno, among others. And let's see, just before welcoming our guests, I want to say the format for our live stream conversation. Chana Kronfeld will introduce Nurit Aviv. They'll speak for about 40 minutes, and then for the last 15 minutes or so of this live stream, we'll open it up to questions from those of you viewing. So please be certain to add your comments and questions in the chat field, and then when we turn to that part of the presentation, we'll be able to ask your questions of our guests. So now it's a great, great pleasure for me to welcome Chana Kronfeld, who is the Bernie H. Williams Professor of Modern Hebrew, Yiddish, and Comparative Literature here at the University of California, Berkeley. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you to the Berkeley Art Museum Pacific Film Archives for hosting this event, and to my dear colleague, Rob Kaufman, for being the matchmaker between us, the shadchan, as we say in Yiddish. I will just say a few words about Nurit's work, and then we'll just jump in and have a conversation. I'm sorry that I can't see you all out there, but please feel free to talk to us via chat, and we'll make sure to include your feedback. Nurit Aviv is a celebrated French-Israeli documentary filmmaker and cinematographer. She was awarded the Grand Prix de l'Académie Française in 2019 and was the winner of the Édouard Glissant Prize in 2009. A retrospective of her work was held at the Centre Pompidou in 2015 and the Jeu de Paume in 2008. She has directed 14 films so far, many of which explore language and other sign systems, including a fascinating trilogy about Hebrew, From Language to Language, Sacred Language, Spoken Language, and Translating. She was the first woman director of photography in France and shot over 100 feature and documentary films with acclaimed director, as Susan said, like Agnès Varda, René Ayot, and Amos Gitaï. My own first encounter with Nuit Aviv's cinematic artistry came when I was a college student in Tel Aviv, trying to be hip, watching Shablul, Escargot, which her camera work transformed from a pop culture film into an experimental masterpiece and helped make it into a cult film, which it still is to this day. Fast forward a couple of decades in my courses on modernism at UC Berkeley, I've always focused on her astonishing cinematography in Amos Gitai's film Berlin, Jerusalem, which ends with what was then the longest tracking shot in the history of film, as she follows poet Elza Laskashula, who became a sort of street person, bag lady in Jerusalem, along the streets of Jerusalem from the 1950s, close to her death, through time, not just through space, ending up in the first intifada of the late 80s. Nuit and I first met in the mid-2000s when Nuit was working on her documentary Translating, and we've kept in touch ever since. In the interest of full disclosure, I was a consultant of sorts on the film Yiddish, so I may be biased, but I think it's really, truly brilliant. So let's get into it, shall we, Nurit? My first question is that bold decision that you made to call the film Yiddish and to tell the story of the language through the amazing avant-garde Yiddish poetry created in Europe and the US between the two world wars. So tell me about that.
Why did I call it Yiddish? How could I call it otherwise? You know, it was so like evident. But for me, you know, it was that these avant-garde poets and poetess, I don't know how the women, they decided very often, they decided to write in Yiddish. It was not like evident. And like the women, they didn't learn to write Yiddish when they didn't go to school in Yiddish. They didn't learn to write in these letters like the Vogel. She wrote already in Polish, and she decided to do it, you know.
She actually had to study Yiddish. This is an extreme case of somebody who was not a native speaker of Yiddish. Not only did she not write in Yiddish, she didn't know Yiddish.
Yeah.
You know, her kind of self-modernization took the shape of learning Yiddish as the exterritorial language that could actually be the medium for that kind of a linguistic and poetic experiment. It's fascinating.
Yeah, so I take her, but you know, I help her. And he already wrote a book before in German, and then he decided to come back to Yiddish. So it was like the choice of Yiddish, of these people, and my choice to make a film on Yiddish. So I thought, Yiddish, you know, like Yiddish, how can I call it otherwise, you know?
So this brings me to the next question, which is, how did you, Nurit Aviv, born in Tel Aviv, as you tell us at the beginning of the film, not knowing Yiddish at home, right? From a German Jewish background where Yiddish was looked down upon. How does it fit in with your language-focused films? And why did you feel the need after your trilogy about Hebrew in particular to do this?
Chana, you won't believe it, but it was after I did the film about sign language. I had never ever thought before I'll do it. Yiddish was already in all my films before. The people were talking about Yiddish, but I didn't I was not a Yiddishist. I don't come from a family. So I never thought I'll do a film, never, ever. And then I did this film about sign languages. You know, there are many sign languages, as my film tells. But what I heard always, it was that sign languages are not real languages and that they have no grammar. And I said, oh, this I have already heard before about a language which is not a real language, jargon or whatever, and dialect, jargon, it's not a language, and it doesn't have a grammar, huh? This is what I heard when I did sign languages. And then I had to do sign languages in order to say, let's go to this language which is not a real language and which doesn't have a grammar. And how can I show it better?
You say all that under erasure, Suratu, right? Yeah.
Of course, about sign languages.
Yeah. And even Kafka repeats that. Even Kafka.
And sign languages have a very complicated grammar, which I learned much more about it after I finished the film, because I were talking to translators who are always the best go-betweens. And then I heard this about Yiddish and I said, okay, I'll go. And in this case, what can be, I don't have to explain anything when there is only one, I don't know, one line of a poem of one of these poets. I don't have any more, to say this is a language, and we are not talking about grammar. There is nothing to say once you hear this poetry, So
amazing, yeah. So,
but
since most of you out there, go ahead.
No, I say it was not like after the Hebrew that I came to. I had to do many. There are some 3 or 4 other films in between, huh?
Right. So, since most of the people out there have seen the film or will see it soon, I wanted you to address perhaps some interesting things about the structure of the film and the ways in which its artistry is encoded in very simple, kind of spare, repetitive moves. So there's 7 monologues by young scholars, each selecting one poet and focusing on one poem, but also providing the particular context for their attraction to Yiddish and to the Yiddish avant-garde, right? So each participant is walking along a street, entering a house, which in Hebrew is bait, through a door. Shots of the window are the only interruption of the monologue. The speaker and the poem are on the screen. The choice of young scholars from different unexpected backgrounds, not even half of them Jewish. The languages the different presenters speak, Yiddish, Hebrew, French, English, speaking from Berlin, Paris, Tel Aviv, Vilnius, Warsaw, and coming from Jerusalem, Petersburg, Antwerp, no American Yiddishists. And is this a way for you to make concrete, to concretize the idea of what Yiddishists call Yiddish Land, or what poets and speakers of Yiddish called Yiddish Land, that is the exterritorial or deterritorialized alternative to nationalist notions of collectivity and community, which during the heyday of socialism, anarchism, modernism really attracted a lot of not just poets and writers, but also political activists to Yiddish. Just talk a little bit about what you do through the structure here.
What I thought is, here is another reason why I called it Yiddish, is it's not only the choice of the poets to write in Yiddish, but the choice of these young people to be passionate to this, and they come from many different countries, and they come from different languages. And yes, this is it's another day. All the 7 of them. This is a sort of Yiddish Land too. But you know, none of them had Yiddish speaking at home. None. This was like, and I thought, okay, young people which didn't hear, and they fall in love with this Yiddish poetry. This is what and yes, when you said yes, it repeats. This is in a way the way I do many of these films. It is really, really going about you know, the theme and variation. You know, this is in music. So I was like, every time I said, well, I will film in his street. He will go home and whatever. And then before he goes home, there is a 5 seconds of his street. And I didn't, you know, when I'm showing the street of where he is. You don't see it, but it is. And then he goes home. You know, what is interesting, you said bait, huh? Bait in Hebrew is the home, huh? His home. But bait in Hebrew is a, how do you say?
Stanza. A stanza. Stanza. Stanza.
So, you know, they go where? To the home or to the stanza, huh? And
the door, right? In medieval Hebrew poetry in Al-Andalus, right? The verse is called bait, and the first half, the verset, is called delet, door. And the second half is called sogel, so it's the lock. Wow. So you open the door and you close the door to the poetry, but also to the house and to the human body, right? Because it's really a fascinating structure for me.
It is also, you know, like in German, it is Heim, but it is something unheimlich, you know, the unheimlich. So I don't know, you have
the uncanny.
Yeah, but because it's, for me, Yiddish in a way is something uncanny about it, I must say.
Wow.
Because at home I spoke German, so I understood it. I mean, when people in the street would talk, I would understand. Till the day, I can tell you, till the day, one day, I don't know, I was maybe 17, I went to the cinema. There was a film called Mirale Efras. You know, it is a theater. Okay. And I thought I understand Yiddish because in the street, I always, when people, because of my German, I understood. And then I went in and I understood nothing, you know. Then I understood it's another language, huh? It's not. And so it's, and what is unheimlich is, on the other hand, it's a Hebrew letters, so I can read it, but then it's German, but it's not German. You know, and this is my problem. That's why I can't speak, and I'll never speak Yiddish, because when I speak, of course, it comes out of German, and all the Yiddish is looking.
We call it Deutschmerisch, right? This Deutschmerisch is frowned upon, yeah.
Wow, so I look at the eyes, they're going to, whoa. So I am not, but it's really like you understand and you don't understand. You think you can read and you don't, but it's because it's not at all the same way to read. So I can read, but I can't read. I can speak, but I can't speak. So this is like, it's near and far. And
so it brings me to the first, to where the only time that you speak in the film, which is in the opening, right? And you talk about your background, but it's also the opening shot has the sea in it. And then I noticed just this time, watching the film for the 10th time at least, I just noticed that the last soundbite over the credits, right at the very end of the film, is the line from Moshe Leib Halperin's poem, Memento Mori, which is featured in the film. Und wer wird es glauben, Moshe Leib, and who will believe that, Moshe Leib? So there's a very subtle framing device going on here. Were you aware of it, or?
But you know, the reason why this picture of the sea is in the beginning, it's not only that it is the sea, it is at 10 o'clock in the morning, like it is in the poem of Halperin. And the poem, you know, I already finished the film, and then I decided, you know, I didn't want to talk in the beginning. Then maybe my producer said, well, you have to say something. And then I had the idea of this, you know. So it was in Tel Aviv. He's not talking about Tel Aviv, but it was at 10 o'clock when there are many people, like he's describing, and he's seeing the death there between all the, you know, the blue sea, and people are, and the death is not sad, and it's not gray, and it's between all these people that are there at 10 o'clock in the morning. He sees the sea and says, hello, hi. You know, he sees, so we did it at 10 o'clock in the morning when the sea is blue, when there are people there, you know. But you won't believe, what you won't believe is that we had to do it maybe 40 times, because to have 1 minute where nobody goes in or out, I wanted just, you know, it took like, we did it like 4 times, and every time 10, and we didn't have 1 minute where somebody goes, because when somebody, you know, a woman half naked going into the water, they will say, look only at her. So to have 1 minute without anybody coming in, so we had 45 seconds, and this is it, you know, and I talked 45 seconds.
It's wonderful. It's really wonderful because, of course, in addition to really foregrounding this amazing epoch-making poem by Moshe Leib Halperin, the Memento Mori, you know, on Long Island, right? It also situates your Yiddish, right, in everything that comes from the sea, from, you know, the Mediterranean that brought the refugees and the other immigrants to the shores.
But in the film, Valentina reads so beautifully. It's just unbelievable how I sing, how nicely this we are talking, they are all reading. Huh? But now we are talking about this. And then Valentina, and this is what you asked, you know, I knew I want to see, I don't want to have subtitles. I want people to read it in Yiddish. So how you know, to find the way that they will read or know it by heart in Yiddish, and people see the translation like a poet in English in English, in French in French, in Hebrew. So there is on one hand somebody reading in Yiddish, and he's really, you know, he's like, he's, you know, saying it on the translation, huh? Which is the poem. The translation of the poet like a poem, huh? And I knew this is part of the picture, has to be there to have that the other part is like an image, because there the poem is like an image. I don't know if you had the impression that you see a poem like an image, and you have the impression like there is sufl. How do you say? Hevel.
Right, the breath, no, the visible breath. The poem is the visible breath,
of them and their eyes going on. So I asked them, every one of them had to have a white, you know, because it's not I filmed them on a white wall in their home, huh? And yesterday I had Lila on the phone, and I said, you know, I always tell, and now I tell it again, that we filmed in Paris, because she was in Paris, but she was in fact coming from Antwerpen. And I wanted to do it in Antwerpen with her. But I asked her, in your room is a white wall? She said, no, everything is blue. Everything is blue? Yes. So we don't go to Antwerpen. We do it in Paris, you know.
So that's Lila who did the Anna Margolin poem. Yes.
I hope she's there and she can.
Hi, Lila, if you're there. She came to my graduate seminar last semester to talk about Anna Margolin.
And with Migle, you know, we see we see a blue behind her. It's blue too, huh? Blue sea, blue wall, but she had a little part where of white wall, and where we were shooting the poem, you know.
It's really
And
fascinating. Yeah, go ahead.
some of them know it by heart, and some of them read it, but you don't know who reads and who knows it by heart, huh?
You
When
were
see
talking about Valentina, Valentina Feschenko.
I hope she's here also. I
I
really
hope you're here, Valentina, with this beautiful reading of Moshe Leib Halperin. And I was really fascinated by her story of how, you know, in Peterburg, she gets to Yiddish avant-garde poetry through Paul Celan.
Yeah.
It is not an accident. And I'm fascinated by the fact that she and other Russian poets and translators were so interested in Dafka, as we say in Yiddish and Hebrew, right? Non-Russian, non-Eastern European Yiddish poetry. But the Celan connection is not accidental, because as we now know, he was a huge fan of Moshe Leib Halperin. We found in his library Halperin's book in New York in Yiddish, of course. You didn't need the translation, with Celan's marginal comments.
But when did you find it?
Not me. I think it was John Felstener who found it, you know, in his library, in Celan's library. It's as part of Celan's research. And we have people beginning to do really important research on the connection of Celan to both Hebrew and Yiddish modernism and the way that it circulates. So this was just an amazing discovery for me. You mentioned Lila, so hi Lila, if you're there. I really see her as the ultimate exemplification of this dedication to Yiddish and Yiddish literature that is, as we say in Hebrew, lishma, for its own sake, not out of any sentimentalizing, you know, schlock nostalgia for the good old days, which were neither, you know, good. So
she says, Lila says that it changed her. She could leave
and what she says is so interesting to me, because the idea that she expresses in such gorgeous Yiddish, it's unbelievable to me how beautiful her Yiddish is. And she's like a kid there, right? She's what, 17 years old when this
No, but she was not when
she was 15, yeah. 15, unbelievable. 16. So she says that this is a language that has no expectations of her. Yeah. And that's why it can really provide a way to see the world anew. And, you know, the poet that she chose was a poet who in the 20s, Anna Margolin, right, was able to say, Ich bin gewesen einmal a Jüngling. Once upon a time, I used to be a lad, a young man, right? And then try to write herself into, and using a German word, Jüngling, it's not a Yiddish word. So that's not the poem that she chooses to read, but the connection between this vibrant young person and this amazing 1920s avant-garde woman poet, it just blew my mind.
You know, you say she didn't choose this. I chose this one, but she chose another one. And I liked it very much because it's a portrait. She said a portrait, you know, and she said, I would prefer to read this one. And she said the portrait. And this is, and it was really, really good, because in a way, most of them were more or less choosing a sort of portrait, reading a sort of portrait of the poets, you know. So she
That's
gave
right.
the, because it's a name portrait, you know. And you say she was, when Margolin says she was a lad, she could be a lad, Margolin, but a lad which is in love with another lad,
Right.
in not only a lad in another lad, in ancient Greek, you know. This is
Right.
and now
And
today
writing herself
all
into, yeah,
all the
and writing
gender,
herself into gender bending, right, Western cultural history, only
yeah,
to get at the end to the price of that, right? Because when she gets to Rome, she starts hearing Wilde Meises wegen Jiden, all those
yeah,
wild tales about the Jews, in other words, the beginnings of anti-Semitism.
yeah,
And you know, the price of majoritarianism is very, very clear there, but it's, you know, an incredible set of poems that she wrote in the late 20s. I wanted to ask you about the importance of women in your film. And that is something that is important throughout your cinematic oeuvre, but also in your collaboration with Agnès Varda. You chose 3 and 3, and then of course Yehoash, the grandfather of the avant-garde. So this is very unusual. We don't usually see people do that, but it's really not a misrepresentation at all, because the avant-garde in Yiddish poetry was very much populated with extraordinary women poets who, you know, are not known, but nevertheless, they're great. So just tell me a little bit about the choice of the poets and the women in particular.
it was done, you know. I just thought before I'm answering, the third woman is in the third poetess in the, you know, woman is Deborah Vogel, which is really, really be talked on. And you know, my dear friend Batya Bon, who I saw yesterday, who is a translator, she now, after the film, translated all Deborah Vogel into French after the film. She knew her before, but the film brought her to, you know, and is, you know, and the one who brought Vogel to us, I think, which is very important, is Carolina. You know,
Yeah.
Carolina, who is really who really, I know she did she wrote her, I think, her doctorate about, you know, the thesis, and also she did how do you say,
Interpretation?
exposition.
Interpretation?
No, no, in a museum. She showed
Oh,
her
exhibition.
exhibition, yeah.
But she
So,
also did an anthology, right, of bilingual
yeah,
anthology, Polish, Yiddish. Right?
yeah. So you ask about the choice of the poets. It was done together with my 7 heroes. Um, it was really work together, you know. It was sometimes I propose, sometimes one, you know, it's like a puzzle. One says I want this, and then the other one say, you know, I can't for everybody. I won't say with whom was what, but it's very yeah. I thought all over that I wanted this person, and also you know, the women, because this is something new. It was new that women wrote in such a really a very avant-garde and very, you know, when you come to think about even sexual, you know, the unbelievable sexuality about which Dory is talking of
Celia
Celia
Dropkin.
Dropkin. Yeah, this, you know, this is new. Even I remember what Dory says, that the one who wrote in Hebrew were not so courage to talk as she talked about her sexuality. Yeah,
And that's really interesting that those amazing, daring and innovative women poets were very often received only as a footnote to some big man's story, the story of their career.
I
So
didn't
Celia
know- I didn't-
Dropkin's, go ahead.
No, yeah, I know.
So Celia Dropkin's poem was incorporated by the great Hebrew writer Genesin, who was her lover for some time, into his own Hebrew text. He translated it from Russian. Dvora Fogel is known primarily for her role in discovering, promoting Bruno Schulz, right?
I know.
But her own work is only recently, thanks to Carolina and the work that Anna Torres is doing in Chicago and Alison Schechter is doing at Vanderbilt, is being both translated and studied very rigorously, very closely, because as Carolina says, her use of language is so extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
And so important for transnational modernism.
Although we must say that we like very much Schulz too, huh?
Of course we do. But there is something wrong with the stories that we tell.
Sure.
Right?
That's why it's not in the film, because
Yes.
I don't. This one,
Right.
So she's, but Halperin is just, for me, this poem is so unbelievable, and Markish, what
Yeah, Peretz Malkish, I've had a crush on, as my students know, for many, many years, and I've written a lot about him. But it was very interesting to see Raphael, who is the only one who's speaking in French, talk about Malkish as kind of a counterpoint to Kafka, right? He's the only one, I think, Raphael, who is trained in the United States. He has a doctorate from Harvard, and he's involved in Geweb, which is a wonderful online Yiddish literary journal.
He's French. He does his doctor in the States.
Exactly.
And you crush on this guy, huh?
Oh, of course. Both women and men. Yeah.
I'm showing you the book about, which came out with the film. But when you say I was crushing,
yeah,
I said everybody must. If those who didn't see, they must, because
this is a guy who
women. I heard when he said when Raphael said it was like a rock. He exaggerates, but I think
he did not exaggerate. He did not exaggerate. There are very, very detailed reports of both men and women swooning. That includes Shlonsky, the great Hebrew poet who during the war, was touring in Europe and reading with Malkish or reading Malkish's poetry. This extraordinary achievement that you bring to light, what do we do in Jewish studies? We blame the victims because he didn't know that, he didn't foresee that he was going to be murdered by Stalin, and he believed that socialism and communism could actually bring some justice to the working classes. Then we have to just completely distort his oeuvre and marginalize it. So this is part of such an important project that you are contributing to.
But you were talking about Kafka, huh? And this is why when I heard somewhere Raphael talking about Kafka, and he said things that I thought about Kafka, So this is why I asked Raphael to be in the film. Because of Kafka, because what he said on Kafka. Then, and then he said, yeah, I want to read Markish. But you see, so here is an example. Yeah, Kafka was the reason I asked Raphael, and for everybody I can say, yeah, I asked him for this or for that, or this was things that it was very intuitively, And when you said about Yehoash, you said, yeah, it's Yehoash, but Tal, in the beginning, he's like a prologue. I mean, yes. I thought that's why he's the only one who looks into the who looks like this. All the other look to the side.
In the profile,
Yeah, but he had another You know, he was, because all what he's saying is preparing into, and Yoash, when Tal is talking, Yoash is the one who translated the first big translation of the Bible to Yiddish, a literary translation. So, like it says, and so Tal has a, you know, another, you know.
And that's really an amazing thing that even though you pretend not to know too much about Yiddish literature, all the modernists, and especially the most radical avant-gardists, regarded Yehoash as their forefather, as the one who made it possible. And his translation of the Bible, and especially of Ecclesiastes, of Kohelet, really gave modernist Yiddish its philosophical vocabulary. So that was just an amazing decision to frame it with
so, but I said I don't know Yiddish, but I read all the poets, you know, in other languages still. And, you know, we had to translate to, you know, you worked with Shoshana to translate to English. It was, we didn't have a translation of everything. So we did everything from the beginning in French, in English, and in Hebrew, you know. And in French, it's Arnaud, the husband of Valentina, and in Israel it's Ronnie Palmer, it's Dory Palmer. Huh?
Right. No,
I see the people want to ask questions.
Yes,
so.
I think we can start taking questions, and I see that Diane, my dear friend Diane Wolf, is asking Nurit whether you have a background in literature. She's astonished by your knowledge of the writers and the poets, as am I, even though you kept telling me as we were kind of discussing it that this is not your field, but of course it is.
It's not my field. Yiddish is not my field, but you know, I can't
you
say.
You have a background in literature, is what Diane is saying.
No, I don't have. I have a background in nothing, you know. But once you go into it, but I really, it's my friend Batya, really, whom I talk with, who is a translator, with whom I learned Sutzkever years before I'm talking about. She was already translating Sutzkever here in Paris, and I had to come to Paris in order to discover all these people, you know? It's not so, and Sutzkever, and then came one, and then came the other, so.
That's very ironic because, of course, Sutzkever was working in Israel when you were there, but he was only, you know, revered and well known, but within the Yiddish-speaking, Yiddish-reading community.
Yeah,
and
but
then later he was translated very widely. And
yeah, but I knew, you know, in the 90s. In the 90s, I already read what I could read, you know, of so. Okay, so.
So I'm just wondering, Susan, if you want to come in.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, hi.
Thank you for this wonderful conversation. I actually have a comment here from Sherry Goodman, our Director of Education at the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. She says, first a comment. She says, I love how we encounter each young scholar and their chosen poet, each so singular in the same way, rhythmically repeated in format. And she says it builds a sense of anticipation and a kind of a choral quality. And then her question is, how did you go about identifying the 7 scholars that we encounter in the film?
The 7, how did I?
Your 7 heroes, how did you find your 7 scholars and what was that process?
I can now tell one by one, you know, but yeah. It's much also in intuition. I must say that not all, but a big part of them, they are around the Maison de la Culture Yiddish, huh? Where Tal is the director of the Maison de la Culture Yiddish, huh? In Paris. And I did a course of Yiddish, and there I met, you know, Migle was in my class, Lila, I saw her around when I after the summer course, I was going to the center, to the Yiddish Maison de la Culture Yiddish, and I met Tal. I knew already because before, long time before. Dory I knew long time before, and then Migle, and of course Carolina. She was teaching, huh? And what was nice when I met Carolina first, she said, I know you. I saw you. She told me, I saw your film and I'm teaching your films. Carolina told me. Then I discovered who is Carolina, you know, and that's so. It was like a small puzzle. Here is one, and also it was really intuition, you know. Lila, I was saying, okay, this girl, and it was great, you know. I didn't know that she will be so good. And Migla was in my class. She was so funny. She was, you know, she's really funny. But I didn't know. And also, what is about, let's say, Migle, you know, she was talking about when I asked her to participate, she didn't yet had the job she's talking about the autobiography and all what she's talking. It happened between the moment I asked her and the moment I met her. She had this job, but when I met her, she didn't yet have this job, you know. So, you know, somewhere God, which I don't know if he exists or not, but anyhow, he helped me always. I mean, to say about le hasard, how do you say hasard? Chance? No. Mikre,
yeah.
mikri. I believe that maybe God is there in the, you know.
Synchronicity, I think, in kind of Berkeley English.
Nurit, and there have been some interesting comments in the conversation so far about your visual design for the film, but I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about how you conceived of the look of the film and how you, obviously it's a structural approach. You are,
Yeah.
Yeah, but could you tell us
like a musical, what is important for me? What is important is really the music, and I'm not talking about the music because there's no music. What is important is rhythm. This is the most important, and how to find the rhythm, although people are, you know, talking, you know. So this is the most important. This is the most important. How to find something which is rhythmic, you know, and also, and when you're talking about the structure, you know, I see like 7 amudim, how do you say?
Columns.
7 columns, and the 7 columns are the 7 texts, and that's why they are in a column, huh? You know, and around this column is always somebody who is doing the job he's doing. They are like actors, you know, but in the middle are the 7, and how will I construct architecturally something which is built with 7 columns, but which is more important is not just the columns, they don't move, but because they are poem, you have it moving, you know, and for me it's the most important, and this is a real challenge, is that the rhythm of the whole film. It's not that, and that's why it's not a film like Interview. It is not it's not Interview. We are working much in order to have. They don't talk for hours, and I cut it. They talk what you see in the film. Maybe, you know, it's not. The idea is that it's going to be in one shot. In one shot, they have this time, and it's never. I can tell you, never the first shot. Never. I already did many films, and with talking, and for me it's a real performance. What they do, it is a performance, because and they are not allowed to learn by heart what they talk. They have this time, they don't have, and that's why the first shot is most of the time too long. most, not always, it depends who, but very often it's too long. And then we cut and we say, we do it again, and we see what we, so we are doing the montage by the shooting. It's not done afterwards. I'm not, I'm not staying in the cutting room very short because everything is already, it's like music, but in the same time, in this frame, which is very, very precise, because it's so precise, you have the possibility to improvise. And they improvise. They have the framework. It's really the framework. But in the framework, they improvise, and they are doing really, for me, what they gave me as a present is a real performance. So it's not like people say it's an interview like we do now. No, it's not. And Chana,
I was going to say, I saw you do that in the film translating, and it's really, my daughter Maya, who's a jazz pianist, is listening, and it's really very much like jazz, where you have to have the precise structure in order to have complete freedom.
And I must say now, Chana, maybe I never thought, because Chana was translating with Chana.
Chana Bloch, rest in peace.
And I could have taken both of them because I knew Chana did as much as the other to talk to two. But first, Chana, it's English is not her mother tongue. And I gave myself like rules that I talk to people which are translating to the mother tongue. This is one thing. And also, the picture, or the picture, I couldn't have one, and for them to have two in the picture. I couldn't imagine because it would disturb the rhythm, because having two people in a frame is not like having one, And I'm talking about the rhythm, not only the picture, not only that they are going to do, because you have one, and then two. It was not possible, and that's why Chana was, and I thought, yeah, but I had to take the other Chana, although maybe...
I was very happy about that, and the importance of rhythm also comes up in the discussion of Sutzkevel's amazing life story and poem, because literally the rhythm of poetry saved his life as he was walking through the minefield, running away from the ghetto, right, to the rhythm of poetry that he was reciting in his mind. I just love the way in which you use it.
And it saved his life, huh?
It saved his life.
But this is what I take from poetry and from jazz. You say jazz, that you have a frame in which, but the frame is very precise, and it's not interview. It looks like it is. People believe it's interview. Okay, why not? I don't, And also it's really, and the reason why I do it is the rhythm, because in the end I have the rhythm, and I love this repetition, always the same. But it's, for me, it's like, wow, I will look through the window, and whatever will be in this place where I'm going to shoot, I will find a beautiful frame. And whatever will be in the home I come to the people, I will find one. And there is one. I'm not cutting into, because there is no reason why to cut, to go to close up. Because the close up is a rhythm I don't want to, and also they have to, once they are beginning, it's theirs. I'm not going to move around and change frame, and I don't need it. You see, because it's a question of, for me, the frame is a question of rhythm. This frame and this frame and this frame, it's not the same. Chuck, huh? Bon. And this is something about picture and rhythm and content, because, they talk about things which are, but in this case, but the other film with me, I always, not always, but very often I have poets in my, because they are the best to talk about language. Who can better talk about? So here, all translators. And in this way, you know, translator in Hebrew, metargem, it's not only, it's the one who is also mefaresh, who is doing the, how do we say? The
Interpretation.
because this is a question of interpretation. And also when you feel music, you say interpretation? Yeah. So this is a question of interpretation, and the rhythm is the most important in it.
So we have a question from Shachar Pinsker. Hi, Shachar, who is a professor of Hebrew and Yiddish at the University of Michigan. And I think he's here with the Translation Studies group and the Yiddish Studies group at Michigan. He says, I love both From Language to Language, which I use for teaching, and Yiddish. It's so interesting to learn about Nurith's filmmaking process, the structure, and the choices made. Fascinating. I totally agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this film talks are in dialogue. From language to language, Yiddish are in dialogue with each other very strongly, huh?
And then another comment from
Yael Havel. Thanks, Chana.
Yael Havel, who is the major scholar of the role of Yiddish in Israel, in pre-state and post and recent. And she is my colleague here at Berkeley teaching Yiddish language and literature. And she says, thanks Chana and Nuit for this rich discussion, and Nuit for the insights into your filmmaking.
And also from Susan Mautner, great program, loved the film. It's a revelation to a Bay Area native whose parents grew up in New York City homes where Yiddish was spoken and read. Nurith, I realize your Yiddish has been broadcast in Europe on television, and so I'm wondering if you could share with us some of the response that you're hearing.
It's not only it was in television, but it came out to the cinema. It was shown for 4 days, huh? Because it was shown. Came out at the 11th of March, which happened to be my birthday. At 2:00 in the afternoon. At 2:00 in the afternoon, there were much more people that could come, and there are 150 places in the theater, and they were double at 2:00 in the afternoon. So afterward it was, you know, and in the evening there was in the Jewish Museum in Paris, there was a big premiere. There were full 200 people in the big, and it was the last thing they did it was the 11th of March. Then 3 days after, all was stopped. All the theater, all the cinema stopped, and so it was the last thing they did in the cinema and in the Jewish Museum, and then it was shown in television. So all the people wanted to come to the cinema. Maybe they saw it in the television, but what is interesting that I did many Zooms, mainly with psychoanalysts. They like my films because, you know, the Lacanian analyst, because I'm doing films about language, they very much like it. They come to all my films. So the last Zoom we did with the psychoanalytic group, there were 420 people, you know. Now, after, you know, all these people who couldn't come to the, and there is really this book where the DVD is here in the end, you know, and it is in all the poems are in 4 languages, Yiddish and 3 other. All the poems are in 4 languages, which makes me really happy that these poems are here. You have it in the film, but you have it also here. You know, it's just 4 languages, the poems, and poems that were never, there are poems that were never translated before into these languages, huh? So I'm very happy about this.
Well, it's a really beautiful film. I think we're coming up on our hour. So I want to thank Nurith, Aviv, and Chana Kronfeld for their time today. And I want to call our viewers' attention to the fact that if you haven't yet seen Yiddish, Or if you want to tell your friends, they can go to BAMPFA.org. That's the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archives website. And there on our Watch from Home page, you'll find Yiddish, which will be screening and through till the end of April. And you can also explore a lot of other wonderful films that we're offering during this period when the Barbara Osher Theater is closed to the public. We look forward to, Nurith, I look forward to meeting you hopefully in the future. Maybe you'll be our guest here in Berkeley. That would be terrific for us and for the campus community. And I just want to thank you for this very special film and for being our guest today. And thank you, Chana, as well.
And thank you